Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to Screen Speak, the podcast that's all about movies, life, and so much more. I'm Jordan Anderson. I'm the host of this thing, and I really, really appreciate you coming by and checking out the podcast. I'm going to get the plugs out of the way, as I usually try to do as early as possible in the episodes. So go ahead, follow and download episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, which that's the most recent addition for Screen Speak. Go ahead and do one or all three of those if you want to. Though it'd be actually a little bit strange if you did that for all three channels, honestly. I mean, it'd be great, but little strange. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram. It's just simply titled @ScreenSpeak Podcast. So you can check that out for just some cool content, teasers for future episodes, and other movie related nonsense. And then the very last plug is that you can check out the YouTube channel just titled Screen Speak. That'll put up some short sound bites on there and eventual video support, maybe even for this episode. We will see. Okay, so the plugs are officially out of the way, so let's just go ahead and get into it. So with me is a very special guest joining me virtually. Sorry, I admit this is this virtual side is a bit new to me, but Adam Wall is back. Adam Wall's back. Hello, Adam.
Greetings, everyone. The technological age is here.
The technological age is here. You don't even have to be in the same room as me. You can just be here and we can have a glorious conversation. Actually, I'm honestly, Adam, I'm gearing up for this episode to be a bit on the darker side, if I'm being honest.
I agree, dude. I think this is a sad movie. This is going to be intense.
Yeah, but I am glad that you actually turned me onto it, or at least recommended it, because I had heard about Roadrunner before you and I had talked about it, but I didn't really, I guess, have like a compelling reason to watch it. But hey, I got a podcast now, so now I'm like, oh, I can watch it, talk about it. There we go. Yeah. But anywho, so let me run through what this movie's actually about. Just kind of go over some of that, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of this. Oh yeah. So Roadrunner, it's a film about Anthony Bourdain, who was a famous celebrity chef, is probably what he's most notably known for, but he was an author, cultural commentator, just overall television personality, I would say. I mean, the guy was a lot of different things. But anyways, it's a documentary actually that is all about his life and fame, and of course, what eventually ended up happening to him, which was him taking his own life. But yeah, just it follows the life and career of him, and I don't know. I mean, it's a pretty authentic look, I think, at him from what I can tell. But anywho, before I get too far into it, Adam, I'm curious, just because you recommended this to me. What do you know about Anthony Bourdain, or did you know him like before the suicide or after the suicide, or I'm just curious.
So my experience with this movie was I knew nothing about Anthony Bourdain before I went into this. Mm-hmm. When I watched Travel Channel as like a kid, I watched Man vs. Food. I watched Flavor Town with what's his name? The flavor guy. You know what I mean.
I do not.
You don't know what I mean?
No, I don't
Frosted
know.
Tips guy.
No.
Who's the Frosted?
Yeah, I know the blonde frosted hair tip guy, right? Big spiky hair.
Yeah.
The Bobby something.
We have to look this up before we continue. Yeah. This is ridiculous. Guy Fieri, Jesus.
Guy Fieri. I thought it was Bobby. Yeah, Bobby Flay is another celebrity chef, but yeah, Guy Fieri. Okay, I know who that is.
So
okay.
I watched shows like that on the Travel Channel. I never really watched Anthony Bourdain. My parents never liked it, so they always wanted to turn the channel whenever he was on, because you'd always be smoking a cigarette or swearing or something along those lines. So I never really watched him as a kid. I knew who he was, and he was kind of more popular when I was younger, so I didn't really know him too well, but I got turned on to this movie because apparently it had pretty good reviews. Mm-hmm. This is actually the first movie I saw in a theater coming out of coronavirus.
Really?
So it was honestly a very good movie theater experience. We got the popcorn, we got the whole shebang. And I saw it in the theater, and it made me realize how much I fucking love theaters, dude. Because it's such a good experience. And being able to fully immerse yourself in the film, like I was able to by going to the theater instead of just like watching it and streaming it at home. Oh, such a big turn on. So this movie, honestly, it had a very big emotional impact on me, just because A, it's a very emotional movie, and then B, just my first time back in the theater and being able to fully immerse myself in a film and having that film experience. Like, I really wanted to talk about this movie, so I'm glad you were able to watch it, Jordan. We could talk about it
Yeah.
today.
I can't say that I watched it in a movie theater. I'll be honest. I watched it on a streaming service, and yeah, it would have been great to see it in theater. And I actually think it's cool that you actually took it upon yourself to actually see a documentary in theaters in particular, because it's not to say that a documentary is not a movie, but for a movie theater, I feel like the average person is probably not going to go out of their way to go and see a documentary, especially these days with what's going on. But that's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm curious, was there a lot of people in the theater?
No, it was this whole theater in downtown. Like, it's kind of like north of downtown in Minneapolis. It's called St. Anthony, Maine. It's honestly
Mhm.
it's a fantastic theater. It's like a theater. They have like a film club there. They play local movies. They do all this. Like, it's a fantastic theater. I'm glad I support them.
Mhm.
But it's also stupid cheap too. It was like $7 for tickets, and a giant thing of popcorn was only like $6 or $7, which is like,
Yeah.
I don't know what movie. I don't know what movie prices were before, but I thought it was a pretty deal. So it was a really good experience overall. It was like, I guess, yeah, Roadrunner isn't really a very like well known movie. It's a documentary, but they show weird movies at the theater in Minneapolis. So we
Well,
went there and saw it.
I mean, I don't know if I'd go as far as saying it's like a weird movie. I mean, I get what you're saying. It's not, again, like a mainstream title. And again, I just think even 10 years ago, people probably didn't really go out of their way to see documentaries in theaters. But I don't know. I guess like in my circles and just being the movie buff, that I am, I had definitely heard about this, and I knew it was actually in development. I think like a year out from when he had done the deed, which
Hmm.
I did double check that before this episode. He did it on June 18th of 2018. So it's been
It's
I,
been
I
3 years now.
I guess, yeah, I guess
No,
it doesn't seem like that. I mean, it seems like he was here not that long ago,
no,
but
yeah, it seems pretty recent. But I
um
mean, they have a lot
over
of film of him, so it makes sense that they
yeah.
they were able to make this movie pretty quickly, because it's just like, that was one of the things. Like, you couldn't make this movie with many people, but the fact that there was constantly a camera on Anthony Bourdain made it so much
Yeah.
easier to portray his life. And it's kind of interesting too. Maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here because I'm
Yeah, you're
talking about the
fine.
movie. But I Anthony Bourdain specifically, like, starts his professional career, and they talk about it in the documentary. He
Hmm.
starts his professional career when he's like 47 or 48 or something like that.
I think 43
Oh,
technically is
okay.
like when he got like his break with Kitchen Confidential, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean the point is in his 40s.
Yeah. So that's really when they start throwing the camera on him. And you kind of, in watching this movie, you kind of realize, wow, the guy just had a camera on him constantly. Because the
Yeah.
film is honestly very fluid for the fact that they didn't know they were making this movie in the first place.
Well, sure. Yeah.
They have very good. I thought they have very good interviews of people, and like at times you could definitely tell like he was dead when they started making this movie, but not many. I don't think you can make this movie with, just because there's so much film of Anthony Bourdain out there. So, but
Yeah, I mean, obviously, for like just the sake of making a documentary, I think, clearly it helps that he was a television personality, and so therefore there is not only the episodes, of course, that were debuted on television, but you have all probably this extra footage and stuff from behind the scenes and his own life. So there's literally just a wealth of material, I think, that obviously you could dig through to make something like this. So just overall for the documentary as itself, I mean, I take it you did like it.
I honestly really did like it, and
Hmm.
I liked it in a way where it made me think a lot about my own life, and maybe there were definitely parts of the documentary I felt could have been better edited. Like, sometimes it jumped around a little bit,
Hmm.
and like it was a little bit jarring. Some of the section, like especially near the beginning, it was kind of jarring to me, figuring out exactly how the editing was working and how the interviews kind of took place. So it was more the movie structure that I kind of had issues with at times, but I thought the subject matter as a whole was presented pretty well, and I thought it was presented in a way where it made me think a lot about my own life, and it made me think a lot about Anthony Bourdain as a person and just seeing him as this very complex person and understanding a little bit more about him. Like
Mhm.
I didn't know anything about this guy beforehand, but I was very interested in him and who he was as a person by the end of it, just because I thought it
Yeah.
was portrayed very well.
Well, no, I mean, I echo a lot of your sentiments. I mean, to just to keep it simple, I did like this documentary quite a bit. I've watched a number of different documentaries. I don't think I've ever like really publicly talked about a lot of them because again, I mostly feel like I talk about like movies. But yeah, as far as documentary goes, it's definitely one of the more memorable ones I've seen, and I think it has good subject matter and obviously with a character, not a character but just the real life person that is Anthony Bourdain. I feel like the documentary does a good job at showing how much like in the gray he was like with his life. I think he was always like in a battle between light and darkness.
Mhm.
And sadly, darkness or whatever you want to call it overtook him in the end. But what I guess I'm kind of curious about is just I want to talk about the man. Like let's talk about the man himself. I said in the beginning that he's a chef, he's a writer, cultural commentator, television personality, a
Yeah, I
world
guess.
traveler.
Did you know him
Um
pretty well? Like, did you know anything about him? Because you were older than me when he was more like famous, I think. Because like
yeah,
honestly, his fame for me was between like 2005 and 2015. Because the
yeah,
last like 3 or 4 years, I honestly had no idea what he did.
yeah, no, I'm trying to think because I think similar to you, I remember just like seeing his face every now and again on TV. I'll be honest, I never watched no reservations or Parts Unknown or any of the other shows he did. I regrettably can say I never did it. I could always go
Mhm.
back and revisit it, I suppose. But
Yeah.
I think I was just more familiar with like I would hear his name and I knew that he was in like that celebrity chef club, if you want to call it, Gordon Ramsay, Guy Fieri. We talked about Bobby Flay. I knew he was somebody that was in that world, but I knew the unique thing about him was his world travels. Like he's the guy on TV that would go to India to eat something really strange and talk about it.
Hmm.
And I always actually just on the subject of like trying different foods and whatnot really quick. I always find it very ballsy of anybody that's ever able to go to such a different place and try something that, I mean, unless the guy has like pristine plumbing,
Yeah.
I would be afraid to try certain foods
Just
because
like
I'm like, I
stick it
don't
in your
want to,
mouth and hope it works out well, kind of thing.
yeah, like I don't,
Yeah, because there
uh,
there were definitely some parts of the movie or some parts of the documentary where he's like, "Yeah, I'm now about to eat turtle," and the man just literally just sticks it in his mouth.
yeah.
Like you gotta have confidence to do something like that. And I just yeah, I have the same problem. And like
Mm-hmm.
I wish I was better at trying new foods like Anthony Bourdain is, but it probably comes with practice. Like he's done it for so long that he's just like, oh, is this a pig testicle? Bam, right in it goes.
Yeah, I suppose after a certain amount of years of doing it, it's not to say that nothing would surprise you, but yeah, I mean, you're certainly more adventurous and open to doing it, especially when it does make for compelling content on television. Um, I want to talk about also just how he found his fame because I think his story, from what I learned in the documentary, it's just very interesting that a man didn't really get I mean he didn't really become like notably publicly famous until his 40s. He had been a chef in a New York restaurant I think for a long time, had a number of jobs in the restaurant industry I think before that. But I don't know, I mean, what do you think about somebody that ends up finding fame later in their life as opposed to earlier when they're younger?
That's a tough question because it's like
Yeah,
I think a good question to ask is like at what age is the proper age to like suddenly become incredibly famous, you
is there
know?
a proper age?
I don't know cuz like I think another example that I think of is someone like John Mayer. John Mayer didn't become famous until he was 23, so he was my age, and then suddenly he's one of the most well-known people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there really is a good age to be like, "Oh, now I'm suddenly famous." I think no matter what age, I think people cope with it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Um because you just become a completely different person no matter who you are, no matter what age you are. You just
Yeah.
like change. And like you saw that kind of through John. I don't know if you know much about John Mayer, but John Mayer is like kind of a weirdo in a sense. but like he's still kind of normal at the same time too, because you could tell he's like lived a little bit of life not being like a completely famous person.
Right.
And I could sort of see the same in Anthony Bourdain, where you could tell he's a chef, where he
Yep.
like he has very similar mannerisms of as a chef, where he's kind of an asshole, he's aggressive, he's
Yeah.
artsy, he's all over the place, he's doing all this stuff, and he plays that well. And I think him being famous at 43, honestly, hmm, I don't know. It's tough to say really whether it hurt him or helped him that he was 43
Yeah.
instead of 23. I
I
don't I don't
just
know.
Yeah, I think from my own perspective, I mean, there's a lot that you could unpack with, when is a good time to be famous or kind of what fame does to you. But I think for him, what I found interesting and through the documentary I thought was interesting was that I think by like the time he got public notoriety, the guy had kitchen experience, but then he also had a heroin addiction. He was addicted to drugs, and
Hmm.
he had gotten clean and got his life on track with namely Kitchen Confidential. That was his big best-selling New York Times memoir that came out.
Yeah,
And I don't know, like, if for me it's hard to imagine actually him, like, if he would have been famous earlier, would he have been the same like in his
that's a good
career, like
point.
when he started? I don't think he would be, because
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, I feel like his fame kind of came at the right time in his life because he had enough seasoned practice with his profession to
hmm,
have an interesting take on it.
yeah,
And I also thought that, kind of like what you said, they didn't mince words about that. He was an asshole sometimes. Like, he
oh yeah,
would rub people the wrong way. He was pretty blunt with his opinions, and I think obviously that probably served him well as a chef in the kitchen and whatnot. But as a television personality, I think that kind of raw, authentic, not giving a shit attitude, I think it translated well. And the fact that he was in New York and that scene, and that's a very specific food scene, I think, to be in.
yeah,
I don't know. There's just a lot about him that, like, he's a lot more famous for more than food. That's kind of what
yeah.
I'm trying to get at.
That's a good point. Do you think it hurt his love life though? Here's another question, because I think he only had one wife that was like the only girl he's been with for like 20 years.
Yeah,
And
I
then
don't
he
remember
gets
what.
famous,
Yeah.
and then I think it's like 2 or 3 years into him being famous is when they divorce finally. Like, mm, I don't, I hate to say that him becoming famous
Hmm.
ruined his love life, but I could honestly see it.
Well, it
I
sounded
could
like,
see things like traveling all the time and things
yeah,
like doing all
yeah,
these
but
TV shows and everyone knowing you would kind of affect that. But maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe I'm
no,
wrong.
I mean, I think it. I mean, look. I mean, fame, not even really just fame, but like with his case, he traveled. The guy, I think he said it a couple times in the documentary. He was on the road like 250 days out of the year, and obviously that's going to do a toll on your any type of long lasting relationship you want to have, both romantically and just platonically, like with your kids or something like that, which he did talk about. He didn't really even see himself being a father for a long time because of his life and his
Yeah.
lifestyle. Um but I guess to answer your question on that, um it probably didn't help him, but at the same time, he even admitted when he was younger that he was all messed up on drugs. He had a lot of debt. Uh, Pretty impulsive person. I mean, I think he had a lot of aspects of himself that even if he wasn't famous, he probably would have had a hard time keeping a meaningful relationship. I'm sure he could get into one because he's not a bad looking guy. He's got intelligence. He can cook food. He's got some stuff going, but
Yeah.
the guy's
That's a
kind of
good
a
point.
basket case, I think, for a long time. I don't know.
Yeah. That's a good point. His
Um,
it, Go ahead. Sorry.
no, no, no. I want to talk about the just his love life, his relationship, because the documentary does talk about that. In particular, I thought it was interesting when they were talking about his relationship with the actress later in his life, Asia Argento, I think is her name.
Oh geez, yeah. That
Um,
was that was very interesting. I didn't know anything about that, but it was
I remember I heard them dating, but I don't really follow like that gossip tabloid stuff. Like, it's like, oh, big deal, you're dating somebody. Like,
yeah, it sounded pretty toxic even from the start of like
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like if I was I don't know. It's tough because it's like he's such an intense person and he's such an asshole. But
Yeah.
if I was like a very close friend, I would be like, "What are you doing here, man? Like, what are you expecting to get out of this person that is 30 years younger than you, that is an actress, that is has a different life perspective than you do, and maybe there was love and maybe there was something there, but I feel like they're quite different people,
Yeah.
and you could. I don't know if it was the documentary itself that maybe laid it out of the fact that she was the one that kind of sent him off on the spiral at the end. I
Well,
don't know enough about Anthony Bourdain to whether to say that was actually the case. I think the documentary was
mhm.
trying to portray that. And what were you? Go ahead.
No,
What were you?
I just I was thinking that from what I could tell from that, because I agree. I mean, I think when they introduced her in the movie, they talked about obviously her involvement with the Me Too movement in its early days and how he hadn't really been like public about any type of political position like that, which I mean, not to say that Me Too is a political statement, but in our day now, everything is almost taken as some type of a political statement.
Oh yeah, no
Um,
political statement is a political statement.
Exactly. Us saying that is a political statement. um, but no, for her, I mean, yeah, I think the documentary was clear that it's up for your interpretation to see what you think, but I think ultimately it was saying that she ultimately had hurt the reputation of Parts Unknown. I think she like they said that she like directed a couple episodes maybe and like just kind of messed things up with the production and
Yeah,
kind of got in his head a little bit. I really don't think that that's ultimately what caused his stuff. I think honestly kind of synopsis or synopsis isn't the right word, but connected to the title, but Roadrunner, the guy was, I mean, it's a good title for the documentary for a reason. I mean, he literally traveled, but I also think he was running from a number of demons within
yeah.
himself. You know?
He had no home. He had no comfort place, so he just kept being on the run the whole time, trying to
Yeah.
run away from all of his depression or all of his problems, whether that be being a poor dad to his daughter or feeling like he was,
Mm-hmm.
or whether that be being poor, being in a bad relationship, or whether that be not enjoying his work, even though people say he has the best job in the world.
Right.
I think demons like that are very tough to deal with, and I think I never got that connection with the title before, but you're right where he's just constantly on the road and he's just constantly running away from
Yeah.
his life, no matter, and like he's had issues before becoming famous too, so it just seems like
Yeah.
maybe it was a way to cope with things even. And like,
Well, and also the title's perfect because I think it's early on in the documentary, but they have that freaking badass song Roadrunner by the Modern Lovers, I think is the title. I listened to that
oh
song
yeah.
now a couple of times since listening to the documentary because I'd heard it before. I mean, I'm serious, like I heard it before, but I'm like, shit, I'm like, this is a good song and it really fits, I think, his vibe. So I mean, good
Mhm.
on the filmmakers for making that connection and just making it work. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, dude, nice.
Now, let me ask you. I want to talk about food because it's impossible to talk about Anthony Bourdain without talking about food.
Oh yeah.
For yourself, Adam, what are some of like the craziest foods you've tried, and where were they at when you tried them?
Craziest foods I've ever tried.
Yeah, or just
Tried.
or at least memorable. It doesn't have to be like an octopus or something. It can just be a memorable food experience.
Did you do the pork tongue experience in Czech Village? Did you ever do
No,
that, George?
no, I have
When it
not.
in like elementary school, maybe this was a public school thing, but they'd always take the elementary schools to Czech Village, and we would go to all the different buildings and explore them and learn about what they did and learn about Czech history and all this stuff. And there would be the butcher, and the butcher would have all these different meats, and he'd offer up pig tongue to people. And I had pig tongue once, and it was pretty bad. I think I was a kid though, so it's kind of hard to say that like
Yeah.
it was good. Really, I don't
Well,
know.
what do you remember about it, like specifically?
It had a terrible texture. The texture was
Uh-huh.
like it was just fucking awful. It was like
Ugh.
gummy.
But
That's
not
how I
not
would
not
describe it.
not in a good way. Like just
Not in a good way, no.
like
Can't
chewy.
gummy be in a good way when it's a meat? I feel like it can't
Yeah,
be. It was
probably
it was
not.
it was disgusting. It was terrible. So that
Ugh.
was one bad experience I've had. I'm not a very like trying new foods is something I'm trying to work on as a person, if anything,
Yeah,
honestly. I am not very good at trying foods and trying weird, zany, different stuff.
that
Like,
surprises me.
oh yeah, no, dude, I'm terrible. I am the like my staple is mac and cheese, quesadillas, bacon. Like I stick to my foods. Like lately, my food schedule, Jordan, has been
Uh-huh.
I got a Costco membership for myself because I like eating the same thing over and over again. So right now, all I have in my fridge is turkey bacon, bagels, cream cheese, spinach, and that's it. And then I just make turkey bacon sandwiches and I just eat that to myself. And then I have yogurt and cheese sticks for lunch every day. And I do that consistently because I am not an adventurous person when it comes to food. And I wish I was more adventurous because every time I try something new, especially as I grow older, I'm getting more like confident in myself and like confident in that other people are, if they're making me something, it's probably pretty fucking good.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
having that confidence is really big in trying new foods. So it's made me like reach out and try a lot more foods than I did even like high school.
Hmm.
But I'm honestly not a very try new foods kind of guy. So I don't know if I have an answer to that. What's your answer? What are some weird foods you've tried, Jordan?
Well, first, okay, pig tongue is still a pretty good answer, my friend. I
Pig
think
tongue's
that's
not bad. Pig tongue's
yeah,
not bad.
it's not bad, but I like just hearing your perspective on foods and just admitting that you don't exactly go out of your way to try a whole bunch of different stuff. Hello, wait, who was that in the back? Who was
That was
that?
my girlfriend.
Wait, let's get her podcast debut. Where is she? Get her over here.
Sophia, get over here. We got to make a podcast debut.
Yeah, let's see. Where is she? Oh,
That's Sophia.
hello.
Oh,
Your
jeez.
podcast, and it's fascinating. You do a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, bud.
She wants to be on your podcast at some point, Jordan. So.
Oh, she's welcome. I need guests. So yeah, come on.
Okay. He said you should come on at some point.
Yeah.
This is really awkward. You should you hear.
Tell
It's good to see you, Sophia. Thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
your friends.
Tell your friends, Sophia.
That was awesome. How's she doing? Just unrelated. This has nothing to do
Unrelated?
with Roadrunner. Yeah.
My girlfriend, she's doing well, dude. She's the one that
Yeah.
went and saw Roadrunner with me. It was her
Okay, I was
idea.
gonna say, like, I wanted to make
So-
sure that you didn't go solo.
No, yeah, I didn't go by myself. I went with my girlfriend. It was her idea. It was a fantastic idea. It was a great movie.
If it was her,
Like,
yeah.
it was one of the first movie. Here's something pretty.
Yeah.
This is insider information, Jordan. But this is one of the first
Okay.
movies that have made me cry in a long ass time.
Really?
But oh yeah, dude. Like the part where they're getting to him committing suicide, it's so heavy, and
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. I was just thinking a lot about my own life as I was watching the movie, and
Yeah.
I've had struggles myself with some of the things that he's talked about,
Sure.
and some of the things even the documentary describes, and I don't know, it hit me hard. So
I
I
think,
really like this movie. I know it's probably not the best documentary I've ever seen, but it hit home
Right.
for me because it hit me personally, I guess. So I don't
it's
know.
a well-made documentary, and I think even whether you have your own personal demons or you have had a loss of a family or a friend due to suicide or something like that, the subject matter alone is, I mean, it's compelling. When someone makes that decision to do that, it is a very compelling thing to talk about, and it makes for a story, especially when it unfortunately happens to somebody that's in the public light like Anthony Bourdain. But we are going to get more on that subject a little bit later
Yeah,
on.
we got distracted. What's an
Food.
interesting food you? Yeah, what's an
Yes.
interesting food you have tried?
So I'll say I'll say two stories off the top. So one was actually in Chicago in 2019. I was there for a work related thing, and after like everything was done for this event, me and some of the other people from the conference, we went out to some restaurant. I wish I could remember the name of it. But it was really cool. It felt like one of those like trendy places. Like I'm not super familiar with Chicago, but it wasn't like in the heart of downtown. It was like kind of on like the outskirts of it, but it was still like
Yeah.
very modern and
Where all the hipsters are.
yeah. Like
Okay.
if there was like a fedora, it would have shown up. Like it would have been there.
Okay.
But anywho, we had this great table outside, and there was like a dozen people, and there was drinks and food, and it was great. And then they bring out this huge fish, this really big fish, like it's got its tail on it and everything, so like you can
Oh.
like it's a big one. I don't know what kind of fish it was, but I just know I'd never seen like it looking like so fresh from like the sea to my plate. You know what I mean?
Damn.
Like it looked like they barely even fried it up. It's just like
Yeah,
there's a
dude.
fish, you know.
Straight out of Lake Michigan, my man.
I don't know. But what ended up happening is like everybody at the table kept getting caught on the eyeballs of it because it had its eyeballs like still in it. Like it was like, you know, it's like ugh, like it's looking
Oh,
at me,
God.
like ugh, you know. And anyways, at that point I admit, you know, we were having a couple drinks
Oh,
and
God.
and one of the people there was just like, like, you know, like I like would anyone actually eat the eye? And like I was just like, I'll do it, you know. And
Oh, no, Jordan.
well, and like, and no one believed I would do it. They
Yeah.
they didn't think I would do it because like they were big eyes. Like
They hit you with the no balls. They hit you with the
yeah,
no balls.
they hit
but-
me with that. But then I was like, no, I'll do it. And then the person that initiated this, they actually offered to pay me. They paid me $100 to do it.
You got paid $100 to eat a fisheye?
Yeah,
What the
Venmo.
heck, Jordan?
Yeah, through Venmo.
This is through a professional conference you went to?
Yeah, it was yeah. I'll just yeah,
That's-
a work related. Yeah.
That's interesting. That sounds
But-
like a good time, dude.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna ever share it like here, but there is a video of it. I have it. If you ever want to see it, because I almost throw up on it because it tasted so bad. And I actually ate both the eyes because that was the deal in order to get the money, is that I had to do both.
What does it taste like?
Well, hang on. So the
Oh,
first
okay.
one I had like I think they let me like just get away with like swallowing it as quick as possible, you know.
Yeah.
And then
Just
the
down the
other
gullet.
one, yeah, but the other one, they're like, if you want that money, they're like, you gotta like chew on it for a little bit, like really like savor the flavor.
Oh, God, dude.
Anyway, the taste, it is hard to describe because when you're having something like that, it's like the texture is impossible to ignore. Like
Yeah.
it was super slimy and it definitely didn't taste good. Like I don't know. It tasted like mud or dirt or something like that. But the grossest part about it, and I'm sorry for the listeners if this is too much, but I still remember to this day, like the first eye when I took the bite in it, it was like it like pussed like in my mouth.
Oh, God, dude. Trigger warning. Jesus. That's terrible.
I'm sorry, like it's like its eyeball goop was just like bleh. And I was
Oh,
like,
my God.
Yeah, that
Are you
was
glad? Are you glad you did that? Was it
yeah,
a good experience?
Yeah. No, like the people that were in that group, like they will forever remember me as the fisheye guy. Like
You'll
they'll
forever remember what fish eyes taste like and what the texture is of them as well.
It's true, but I felt good about it because at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, even if I like hack it up and it's like super gross, this makes for a good story.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
it is a good story. And then the second one I would say was actually the first time I went to Brazil. I had tried a chicken heart, which that's not like super exotic like down there, but like, you know, to me, like
that's
pretty
fucking crazy.
pretty nasty. But no, the interesting story with that not the chicken heart was they eat goat in Brazil.
Oh.
They eat goat in certain parts of Brazil, and we were at a restaurant that their specialty was goat. And Isola, she ended up ordering this I don't know, it if you hadn't have known like what it was, it would have just like looked like a stew, you know, just like a little bowl like it of like stew, and
Oh
it
my
looked
gosh.
good, it looked appealing, right?
Yeah.
And so I was eating a couple bites of it, and I was like, like, you know, this is pretty good, you know. And she's like, oh, like, you know, I'm really doing a bad impersonation, but she's like, oh, like, do you like that? I don't know. She doesn't sound anything like that. But it was funny because I was like, why is she like making this face? I'm like, this is just it's normal food. It's just like meat in a dish. And she's like, do you want me to tell you what that is? I was like, oh, well, sure. I'm like, you know, what is it? I've already ate like half of it. And then she spilled the beans that bowl I was eating was like mashed up like goat intestine and like kidney and like liver or something, like, and it's like all chopped up in the bits and like
Oh my God, dude.
But
did that taste good?
It did. I'm not gonna lie. It tasted
Interesting.
good. Yeah. Like, and I guess like some of the people there, like it's kind of like 50-50. Like people either love it or they hate it down there. But
Yeah.
if you, it's like even after she told me what it was, I was just like, well, I'm this far into it, and I
What
didn't think it was gross, so I'm like, oh, I keep eating it.
what would you describe it as what's a close meat relative to goat
To-
intestine?
Well, I don't know about goat intestine, but just goat as a whole, like it feels like it's a drier meat. Like if I could,
Okay.
I mean, I'm not great at like describing meats, but
Yeah.
it's like a
Okay.
dry. It would taste like a dry like ribeye or a steak or something like
Okay.
that. But it's not
Interesting.
bad. Like actually, like just regular goat meat, it's actually really not that bad. It's not. I have no
That
idea how
sounds
they
pretty good.
prepare them though.
I gotta come down to Brazil, try out all interesting foods.
Well,
Because
you
like
definitely need to.
going to new countries is where you can really be like, oh yeah, we eat I don't know, what's something weird, jellyfish down here and
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, have you
No, so I got go
have you
ahead.
have you traveled outside of the country?
I've gone to like Mexico and I've gone to like Canada. Oh no, not really. I wouldn't say to any sort of like proportion where the culture is completely different. Like
Hmm.
most of the time when I travel out of the country, it's been in a culture that's similar to mine, and I'm not out of my comfort zone, I would say.
Hmm.
And that's something I want in my life, so I'm definitely going to be doing it soon. Probably next year because coronavirus is still like all around. I was gonna like my original plan was to go to Europe last
Hmm.
year, but coronavirus knocked that out. So I'm trying like literally as I can, and as soon as like reasonable and I can find someone to go with me, like
Yeah.
I really want that like cultural shock experience. I've never had something like that, so I don't even know what it's like. How would you
Yeah.
describe it?
Yeah. I mean, I would. It actually it leads me kind of into the next subject that I had for this was just talking about the importance of travel and specifically to a place that you are not familiar with, like you said, kind of culture shock. Um,
Hmm.
Prior to me being engaged, I don't honestly know if I would have gone out of the country. I mean, I think I always liked the idea of it, and I always like had like my bucket list of places that I'd like to go. But obviously being engaged to someone from there, it makes it more of a compelling reason to
No, it's
actually
like
do
yeah,
it.
I have to go to Brazil now. Very much
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the first time, yeah, it was a whirlwind, honestly, because like first I went there in 2020,
Hmm.
arguably during like the height of the pandemic. Like it wasn't in March, but like I think I had left for there in May or June. I'd
Oh,
have to
okay.
go back and double check, but I just remember like there was so many people that were like worried for me like going
Yeah.
there because they're just like, oh my god, like because like you said, Europe was like closed and all these places were shutting down because of the travel
Hmm.
bans. But Brazil, it was actually kind of goofy. They were letting me go, but they wouldn't like let people from Brazil come to the US, but yet I could come back. So it's like, well, what if I'm like a COVID carrier? Then like
Oh.
you know what I mean? Like it's just
Weird. Yeah, it was near like the start where like the government had no idea what was going on. No one knew what was going on. So.
yeah, it was a little chaotic, like just in that sense, and like just
Hmm.
traveling internationally with like that being like in the air, just I think made it a different experience just from a travel perspective.
Yeah.
But no, as far as the culture shock, like I still remember it was probably like flying over Sao Paulo, which is the first like destination I had to fly into.
Hmm.
Like I just like, I looked out the plane window and like I could just see like all this like, close packed housing, like not quite like favelas like in like Rio de Janeiro, but pretty close to it. And it was just,
Yeah.
so massively different from what I'm used to seeing.
Oh
And
yeah.
I just
And like
remember
not
like,
seeing English on signs and stuff like that is probably also just
yeah.
that would throw me
I
off.
just remember like I saw those buildings for the first time and like I think I like said out loud, I'm like, I am in South America. Like
Yeah.
I'm actually not in like North America. Like, like
Yeah.
I'm really far away from home. Like,
Especially compared to like the Midwest, because like the
oh
Midwest, we
yeah.
are so like sheltered
Oh,
culturally
absolutely.
speaking, because we are like home people. We're stick to our guns. We're very like I don't
Hmm.
know. I've grown up in the Midwest my whole life. I've lived in the Midwest my whole life.
Yeah.
And like it's honestly there's a cultural difference living even in like the Southwest or living in the South
Hmm.
compared to the Midwest. But I've lived in the Midwest. I've like known the Midwest for so long
Hmm.
that I'm sure going to a different country is going to be or it must have been just such a cultural shock and such a like oh my
Yeah.
what the heck is going on right now?
I think to finish wrapping up on like talking about the cultural shock of it, like probably what was most apparent to me was actually, like, I mean, again, I go back to the buildings. The architecture alone is just so vastly different than how, I'm used to seeing buildings here, even in like bigger cities.
Yeah.
They have a very specific way of building things there. The materials are different. There's a lot more like tile flooring in a lot of the places that you go to. And then, of course,
Yeah.
I think just like their businesses too. I feel like there's a lot of areas in Brazil that have like really small, tiny shops, and I mean like tiny, like they're all like
Mm.
really packed in closely together. And there was just so many different things like that where it's like you just pick up on all these like little things that you don't think about.
Yeah.
And then I know, I mean, I could keep going on this, but I'll say like just the fact that like in Brazil alone, they don't have clean water for the most part. Like they have to get like big jugs of water brought to them to like drink out of, and they have to keep replenishing them like that. Most
Dang.
places don't have hot water. There's
Wow.
certain places that do, but it's like there's just so many different things that I think ultimately the biggest shock of the culture or whatever you want to call it is like you just gain a deeper appreciation for the things that you do have, and
Hmm.
also realize that wherever you live, even if it wasn't America, like you're not the center of the universe. I think
No,
that's what I would say.
definitely, dude. No, that sounds like a fantastic experience, and it
I
makes it
highly
makes me
recommend
want
it.
it makes me want to do it so bad. So
Well,
next year, Jordan, I tell you
it
what.
changes you. I mean,
Yeah.
it does change you. I mean, and I think for the
Does
better.
does going to Brazil make you want to go to other places? And like
Yeah.
where would be the next place you want to go? Like would you go
Well,
even more crazy, do like Thailand, or would you
mm,
go to Europe, or where would be your next
there's a
location?
lot of there's a lot of different places. The three that come to mind off the top is one, Japan. I've always wanted to go to Japan.
Mm, okay.
And then New Zealand for Lord of the Rings stuff.
Oh yeah.
I'm a nerd at my core.
Yeah, you
And then
gotta
actually
do that.
the one I really like to go to that I feel like not a lot of people do want to go visit is Greenland and Iceland. I would
Oh,
really like to go to both those.
I've heard Iceland tickets are really cheap too, where it's pretty easy to get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
So,
and it's
dude,
not like there's like
Iceland.
the most things to do there. It's just a really scenic, beautiful place.
Yeah, I've
And
heard it's just unbelievably beautiful. So,
I
dude,
would like to
that would be
go.
super cool. That sounds awesome.
Where
Yeah.
would you want to go?
Honestly, like I I would say Europe, but I feel like I would want to do more Eastern Europe than I want to do Western Europe. Like if I were to go to Europe, I would probably start in Germany as a hub just because
Mhm.
probably like the pretty similar to America, but then I want to go to like Budapest. I want to go Eastern Europe big time or do like Croatia or
You
Estonia or
say I'm
something
sorry,
like that.
you say Croatia?
Yeah, dude, Croatia would be sick.
Where's
I've
Croatia? Like
it's
I've heard of it. I don't know.
It's in Yugoslavia. It's kind
Hmm.
of it's the country that basically took all the coastline of Yugoslavia. So
Okay.
it's very beautiful because of that. So very Mediterranean kind of place. But I want to go to places like that, or maybe even like Greece if I were to pick Europe. But
Hmm.
then I also really want to do Southeast Asia at some point in my life.
There's a
Like
lot of places, man. A
I
lot.
want to I want to just get on a flight to like Thailand or get on a flight to Vietnam and have no idea what I'm doing and just figure as I go when I get there and just like totally culturally shock myself.
Hmm.
It's on my bucket list for sure. I don't know when I could do that, but that's definitely also one of the first places I'd be looking at if I'm
Well,
gonna have that sort of experience.
I mean, since you haven't traveled internationally, I guess like have there been places that you have traveled to that you do you felt impacted by going?
I like when I travel, like lately I do national parks. Like that's something my parents have always done. Like
Mhm.
they love national parks. They love seeing nature. So they kind of instilled that in me. So when I go on trips and I go on road trips, I usually go to national parks or I go to mountain ranges or beaches or something like that. Like I'm a big nature guy, Jordan. So I've gone to like probably 20 national parks at this point. And like a goal in my life too is to hit every national park at some point in my life. And I think one of the greatest things about America as a whole is the national park system and the park system as a whole. Um, an interesting story is when I went to Canada. Canada has sort of a different national park system than America does, and it's very commercialized, and it's kind of off-putting in a sense too. Because I went to Banff area. I don't know if you've ever ever heard of that area, but it's
No.
basically giant mountains, beautiful lakes, kind of a ski resorty area though is a thing where it's like you're in the middle of this beautiful place, and then there's a giant man-made built cabin right next to a beautiful lake with mountain ranges. And it honestly kind of threw me off a little bit because I'm so used to America where the beautiful place, like it's filled with people sometimes, but they do a very good job of conserving like national parks as a whole and conserving our beautiful landscape that America has and the diverse landscape that America has.
Mm-hmm.
So good on America for doing that, I think, because Canada's got some work to do. Canada does have like very beautiful national parks. You just kind of got to go to the ones where there's less people. So like Banff, honestly, Banff isn't really my favorite. If you go farther north to like Jasper, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot less people there, and it's pretty much the exact same views, and it's a lot more beautiful and a lot less commercialized. So I like places like that. But so that's an interesting cultural difference, I think, between even Canada and the United States, which isn't very like they aren't very different at all, but there's still that slight difference there, which is interesting. So
No, that I like hearing about that. I mean, I've always known, like, just ever since I've known you, you've always been in the nature and parks and hiking and camping and those kinds of things. And I mean, that's another reason why I like you, sir, is because you actually like nature and support it. So yes,
dude,
so
Jordan,
salute to you.
Jordan, we gotta go camping at some point, dude.
I would love to go camping. I
I don't think
haven't
we've been camping
done.
before.
No, and I mean, I know for myself, I haven't been like legit camping, like tent, sleeping bag, like on the ground in years and
Really?
years.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, dude. No, we
I'm
gotta go
overdue.
sometime. No, some people are not camping people, but my parents just kind of raised me that way. And
Yeah.
I've done it a lot more since the pandemic has started. Like I've really ramped it up since the pandemic started because I'd have weekends and it's like, oh, there's nothing to do. And
Hmm.
Minnesota has beautiful parks. So we just like go north and there's just like you don't even need reservations or anything like that. You could just go in the wilderness and find a camping spot and hang out with your friends. So
I like that.
I'm a big camping guy. If I travel, that's what I like doing. I like avoiding people and going in the middle of nowhere, which is a bit different than what Anthony Bourdain does, I think. But
Yeah, well, and that's kind of something I wanted to talk about too, is just, with him, I mean, he is on record for a long time saying that, he had the greatest job in the world. He got to travel and see all these interesting people and places. And I do think that, I mean, I don't think he did not mean it. I think he did
yeah,
mean it. I think for a long time that he was satisfied and he did that. But then I don't know. Ultimately, I do wonder how much he actually was happy with doing it, and the documentary alludes to that too. In particular, one of the tough scenes on there was when I think it was David Cho, or
oh yeah, dude.
I he was talking how he's like, yeah, he's like, he emailed me like out of the blue, just being like, hey, like, you're doing pretty well and happy and healthy, like, are you actually happy? And I don't know, I guess going back to you, I mean, just personally for yourself, this is where we're going to get into some, heavier subject matter. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No,
I
I
mean,
got
how do you?
here
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
when I watched this movie. One of the big things that I got out of it, things that hit me the hardest was, and you alluded to it, where he talked about him living this life of traveling and living this life of doing all this crazy stuff and then still not being happy. And it gave me this realization of like, I like, if I'm not happy in my life, I blame it on the fact that like I'm not doing enough cool shit, or I'm not
Mm-hmm.
cool enough, or I need to go travel more, or I need to do this cool new thing, blah 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 blah, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of made me realize watching this movie that like he romanticized his life so much to the
You say,
point where
I'm
he's
sorry.
doing all.
You say romanticize.
Yes, because like
Yeah.
he would
Yeah.
like he does all this really fantastic shit, but at the end of the day, I don't think doing all this fantastic shit of traveling and seeing all these cool people and meeting all these interesting people and doing all these cool things doesn't that's not the solution to being happy, I don't think. That's not the
Mm-hmm.
solution to having a happy life. And for me personally, that's what I thought it was, honestly,
Yeah.
before going to see that movie. But looking back on it, it's so much more complex than that. The being a happy person and living a happy life. Because there's so many people who don't go traveling and do all these crazy things and live perfectly happy lives.
Right.
So that's kind of what hit me hard because I always just thought I could solve the problem not being happy with going out and traveling or doing some cool new thing.
Mm-hmm.
but it's so much more complex than that, you know? And I don't know.
Well, how would you define happiness? I know that that's like the $1 million question for a lot of people, but I mean, do you yourself, I mean, do you know what makes you happy?
I don't think I do. I
Yeah.
don't I think it's different for each person what makes them happy. Like
Yeah.
I know things that make me happy in life, and I know like what I can to maximize my happiness and not just sit around and be depressed all the time. But like I haven't gotten to the point in my life where I'm satisfied with my life. And
Hmm.
gotten to the point in my life where I'm like, okay, yes, I've done it. I've officially figured out this whole life thing. I'm officially a happy person. And I haven't reached that point personally. And it didn't seem like Anthony Bourdain ever reached that point either. And he did all these extravagant things. So I think there's more to it than just meeting new people and traveling to being happy than that. So and
Well,
that was my definition of it, honestly, or one of the big parts of it beforehand was experiencing new things.
yeah.
But
Well, I
I don't
think
think that's it. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, no, you're good. I think Anthony Bourdain, just from everything that you see in this documentary and just about him, I mean, I talked about the clever title Roadrunner and how it applies to him, but I think somebody like him, he strikes me as what I would define as a seeker, a seeker of truth, a seeker of meaning.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know, I think my interpretation of him or kind of how I view it is that, like you said, he was able to fulfill a lot of desires I think that he had through travel, through food, even through drug use at one point. I mean, he drank quite a bit, and he actually
Smoked
yeah, he smoked.
constantly.
Yeah, he smoked a lot. He lived a hard life, but then he was an extremely hardworking guy too. I think he valued that in a lot of different people. But I guess going back to happiness is that it felt like, I don't know, I guess at the end for him, like it felt like he still didn't really like feel like he had like true meaning, I guess. Like I don't know if he was really feeling connected to the meaning of things.
Hmm.
Um I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I guess like, this is where I'll identify happiness for like myself is, I don't know, I don't know if anybody truly has that figured out. I don't know if I believe it. Even if somebody tells me that they're like, like I'm like super happy like all the time, I'm like, like, are
Yeah.
you? Are you? Like, I don't know if I believe that.
Hmm.
Because I don't know. I think we're always searching for happiness. We're searching for that next thing. We're searching for another experience. We're searching for feeling connected to something. And I
Hmm.
think what pains me about Anthony Bourdain is that, despite him having a lot of these, no doubt, profound life experiences, whether it's auditory experiences or sensory, uh, the experience takes a lot of different shapes and forms, but ultimately, he must have had something eaten in him pretty badly that none of those things would sustain it. And I
Hmm.
don't know. I guess like for myself, I think experiences and travel and trying different foods, meeting different people. I mean, I think there's certainly a lot of enriching qualities to that, but I do think true, real happiness is ultimately something that you find within yourself deep down. And
Hmm.
for myself, I have to feel a sense of purpose or connection or emotional attachment, I feel like, to something in order to truly get those brief moments that we call happiness. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Huh. Yeah. I completely agree with you. Like you, there's all these external factors, but really like true happiness at the end of the day has nothing to do with any of that. And it
Yeah.
is really more about this complex that is you and finding purpose in you and working with external figures, whether that be a relationship or traveling or whatever it may be. Like that stuff is important, but being a happy person, finding purpose in life is more than that.
Yeah.
And that's
And some
something that's
people,
something that's hard for me to grasp because it's something I'm struggling with. And I'm, I don't know, Jordan. It's tough. It's tough to say I need to find purpose in life within myself, but
no,
I personally don't know how to do that. It's like, shit, I run into this issue. Anthony Bourdain ran into the same issue. Not saying I'm Anthony Bourdain, like
No, I understand.
I'm definitely not as depressed as he is, but some of his issues that he had, like I could see in myself sometimes of just like a lack of purpose or
Yeah.
a lack of like, I don't know, finding the true reason to be living, you know?
I know for, I can speak to myself, of course I can only speak to myself. I don't like to try to pretend to know what other people are feeling inside. Uh yeah, especially with a subject like depression, honestly, Adam, because that takes on so many different shapes and forms, and some people's depression runs real deep, and you could be around someone that seems perfectly fine, and then before you know it, they're going to, end their life for various different reasons. You just never know, I feel like.
Yeah.
um and what was the thing that you just said? Because I was actually going to tie something directly back into that. I want to make sure I don't forget.
I don't remember what I just said. I
Yeah.
don't know. I do have a point to make though, that I think
Yeah.
depression and the treating of it is so difficult to treat, and it's hard to treat
Oh
even with
yeah.
like your friends and different people, just because our minds are so fucking goddamn complex, and
Yes.
everyone deals with it differently. Where you said before, like someone you don't even know they're depressed,
Hmm.
and then suddenly this all comes out at some point, and like every single person deals with it. There's so many different things that go into something like that, and it's tough to deal with. And I think we're all battling our personal battles at the end of the day, some more than
Yeah.
others, and some are battling them better than others. But
I remember what I
it's
was gonna say.
depression's a tough thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, just, for me, um, I think I'll be very open when I say that anxiety for myself has been something that it's been an ongoing struggle. I mean, and I realize you're like, okay, like, ooh, like, big whoop, you're anxious. Like everybody is anxious. I mean, every single person out there has anxiety about things at one point or
Let it be
another.
known I am not saying that. Let it be known I'm not saying that.
No, no,
But
I understand that, but I know for myself, you watch a documentary like this, you can't help but relate some of those deep internal feelings of conflict back to your own experience. And yeah, I mean, I've had times where if like my anxiety gets like really bad, I will have thoughts that run through my mind that'll sort of put me in like a weird state of like feeling numb, where I'll kind of just like ask, like, like why does this matter? Like, is there
mhm,
meaning to any of this?
yeah,
Like who cares? Like this means nothing. And sometimes those thoughts, honestly, like it can become you almost get like out of body, like a out of body experience when they get like really bad, because you're realizing how powerful that like they are, and like it's actually like controlling like your actions and like how you're going about your day. And yeah, I mean, I've certainly had times where like my anxiety is like peaked like no other. And I find myself questioning like why am I getting like these kinds of thoughts of like meaning, and having to feel like I have some kind of connection to something. It's like, do I have to, does everything have to have a meaning to it?
yeah,
It's, I mean, this is a very, like, this conversation can go in a lot of different ways, but I'm just being real. Like, anxiety and depression and things like that, they are absolutely real demons that people are facing every day. And as cliche as it is, I think it's actually very important and healthy to be not only communicating about it, but just to feel like you can actually voice it without somebody thinking that, oh, that person's a walking train wreck, like
yeah,
there's judgment and things like that.
yeah,
It's considered sometimes, I think, still to this day, like a sign of weakness when somebody is being very transparent with their mental health. It's
yeah. I think we've
yeah,
gotten a lot at it, because I think people recognize that, like,
especially during
you
the
know,
pandemic.
yeah, it's like we're in a new generation now. Like those baby boomers are so like their catchphrase is up and get used to live your life, and like you can that can work for some people, but I think communicating with people about your issues and communicating with people what is getting you down in life, even if your life is going great, I think is really helpful. And I think it's helpful in understanding your own mind, because like sometimes I say these things about feeling and how I'm depressed or how I'm questioning certain things in my life or whatever it may be. Like I don't know what that actually means. I don't know what conclusion I've come to from the feelings that I've had in my life. Expressing those feelings to other people kind of helps me a little solidify what is going on in my head, and actually how to like deal with certain things that I don't know how to deal with. So I think you're right that talking with people about things like this is very important. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this movie, because
Yeah.
like this is the conversation I wanted to get to, because it's something I thought about so much when I watched this movie, was just the
Yeah.
internal conflict with myself, and kind of seeing that with Anthony Bourdain and seeing his conflict,
Hmm.
I think was just portrayed so well, and just being able how he dealt with his issues, how he was able to deal with those issues, and I was just able to see so much of my own issues with that, and
Yeah.
just being able to sort of put pieces together of why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling in my life, you know.
Well, I think for Bourdain, they alluded to this, and I think he may have, maybe he said it directly, but the documentary definitely touches on the fact that a lot of people came to the conclusion that he had imposter syndrome, where he always was never really like thinking he should be even famous. Like he's like, I'm not deserving of any of this, and you could attribute some of that to lack of self-esteem or depression or any of one of these things that we've talked about. But I don't know. I mean, what do you think about people that get that type of imposter syndrome, or have you ever experienced moments of that?
I definitely still experience. I wouldn't say that's a big issue for me these days. Like
Hmm.
I one of the things I like myself is that I'm confident in myself. Like
You
that is
are a
one of my
confident man. I know
that
that.
is one of my traits that I like about me, and I could see he was definitely struggling with that confidence. I mean, maybe that's part of becoming famous. Like it's so much more difficult to deal with something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think imposter syndrome's tough because you, like being too confident leads to you just being a complete asshole and not humble at all.
Yeah.
So you gotta find the middle ground of being humble, but not so much where it's have no self-worth, you have no belief in yourself. And I don't know if necessarily what the strike was for Anthony Bourdain is what made him commit suicide. But you're right, that was definitely a factor. And maybe that has to do with just the fact of who he is as a person. Maybe that has to do with the fact that he was running from home all the time. Who really knows?
Right.
But
Well,
what's your
I
take on the imposter syndrome thing, Jordan?
well, it's a relatable feeling. I think some people maybe lean into that side more often than not. Especially I think like when you experience success, that's probably when you feel that type of a feeling, the most, is like when like you're at the height of a success, or you're peaking at something.
Hmm.
I think it's very easy to look inward on yourself and just be like gosh, like I'm like wow, like you're amazed that like it's happening, but at the same time you're like is it, am I really getting this? Like I kind of like faked it till I made it. Like does
Yeah.
do people realize that? Like I
Hmm.
think there's a lot of feelings like that can happen. I can say for myself, I definitely am very mindful of arrogance, I think. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think for myself I've had experiences where maybe I've been a bit too mindful of that, and it's come across like I'm not confident on something because
Hmm.
I really don't I'm not really I don't gravitate towards people that are boastful, that talk about themselves, that are very, narcissistic and self-centered like that. It's something that's always kind of been a turnoff for me, and I don't really want to be that way myself. So it's a tricky balance, like you said, because like there are times where you do need to show confidence in yourself, and be proud of the work that you have produced on something, and take ownership of it. But
Hmm.
I don't know. I guess like where I'm at in my life right now, I'm learning that you can still do that and still be humble about it. Like it's okay to do it. I think the key is just not being long-winded about it when you're asked about like something that you did well. Just don't go on,
Yeah.
just keep it
Understand there's
keep
other
it
people in the world,
simple.
you know? You're not the
Yeah.
center of the world, you know? You're
No.
not the center of the world. I'm not the center of the world. But I'm just a normal dude. Like, hey, I'm me, you know? It's like, what do you expect me to do? Something that I wouldn't do? My name's Adam Wall, you know? I don't know, dude.
So I know you had touched on this earlier when we were talking about traveling to different places and all the different places that you had listed off, and I believe you said Vietnam actually for one, and I wanted to talk about Vietnam actually because specifically because of In the Heart of Darkness and Apocalypse Now and that connection that Anthony Bourdain had to it. I don't know how familiar you are with Heart of Darkness, or if you, I mean, have you seen Apocalypse Now? That's the more common one.
I honestly have not, Jordan. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not the movie guy in the world. What is Apocalypse Now? Describe to me Apocalypse Now.
Okay, so I'm gonna try my best to. I probably won't do a great job, but I'm not gonna Google it because I just want to give you my honest, raw thought of Apocalypse Now.
Okay.
Um, so it was, I believe it was made in like in the 70s at some point. I don't recall when, but Francis Ford Coppola made it, and excuse me, Francis Ford Coppola made it, and it was arguably like the height of his career when he made it. I mean, he had made like The Godfather, Godfather Part Two. He was a very prolific and very very powerful director. I mean, like he was like making like the really serious, like thought provoking movies back then. And
Hmm.
Apocalypse Now was his take on the Vietnam War and specifically what it does to people like on a primal level, I guess is how I would
Oh,
interpret it. Because the movie is
okay.
about it follows a, I think he's like a lieutenant like in the army, or he gets recruited by like the CIA in like some type of black ops mission. But the guy's played by Martin Sheen. Um,
Hmm.
Martin Sheen's amazing, by the way.
Okay.
But anyway, he gets recruited to by his own government to go in and assassinate a well-regarded colonel in the military who went
Dang.
deep into the heart of Vietnam and essentially lost his mind. At least that's what they tell you. They're like he lost
Wow.
his marbles. He is doing stuff without our authorization. We have no idea what he's doing. He's completely disconnected from society. Like
Okay.
like we think he's trouble. Like you need to go in and eliminate him.
Yeah.
And it's very it's a deep movie, and it's a long movie to watch, but essentially you follow Martin Sheen and you go along with him and this squad of other people in the army, and they kind of slowly get closer into the heart of Vietnam. And by the time they get to Colonel Kurtz, which is played by Marlon Brando,
Hmm.
um, they're so far removed from society. I mean, like it is purely like there is no there's no rules, there's no government, like
Yeah.
there's I
It's
mean, it's like
just.
animals. I don't want to say it like that, but I mean like it's like men in nature. And so anyways, I may not be saying this right, but the movie
Huh.
is a it's looking into like the idea of what happens when you completely remove yourself from any known civilization and what you learn about yourself in the process, like from a purely
Oh.
sensory, like just total psychological place.
And you think
It's a
that's how Anthony Bourdain feels because he's seen the world that he has?
I think he
Is it?
traveled an awful lot, and I have to imagine that when you've traveled to the extent that somebody like him is, and you're constantly in the mindset of being a seeker of truth, like you're trying to find meaning in things.
Hmm.
I I don't know. It's my opinion that he probably would not be afraid to go deep into travel. Because they talk about that in the documentary too. It's like travel's not just always going to see the sights and eating the food. It's like you're going for an experience. You are going to learn things about yourself and try new things and discover things that you had no idea about. And I don't know. I think from what I can tell, I mean, he had a connection to it partly because of his age. He was alive around Vietnam and
Hmm.
whatnot, so I'm sure he has a lot of memories of that. Of course, Apocalypse Now, he got to probably see it in theaters for all I know.
Yeah.
And but then in Heart of Darkness, that's what Apocalypse Now is based off of, and I believe it's a famous novel, I want to say.
Okay.
But anywho, I would definitely recommend Apocalypse Now, but I guess I'm
I'll check
where
it
I
out.
well where I
Next
t-
podcast we could talk about
that's right. Where I tie it back to Vietnam though is I don't know. I mean, like, would you ever you think you would ever find yourself traveling, like trying to remove yourself so far away from reality that you're just like, I just want to see what happens? I mean, you talked about your love of nature, but I mean, it's like, how deep into those woods are you gonna go?
I guess I've never like seen something like that, and like, but you're right, and like I don't know if I would go somewhere like a war zone or
Yeah.
like I know in the movies to the Congo, like I personally would not want to go there. I don't know if I want to experience that experience yet in my life. Like I'm not confident enough in the world that I know to a world like that. That's just it's probably sad to go to places like that. Unbelievably sad, I'm sure. And just like
Yeah.
seeing things and being like, well, this is the world, you know? This is a part of the world where things like war go on, where things like exploitation are constantly going on. I don't know if I would do something like that. And I think that's probably something that Anthony Bourdain did quite a few times and
Mhm.
probably did not help him in the long run going to places like that.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like so I actually have pulled this story. I'm gonna cite this in just a moment because I think it's going to make sense with the point I'm trying to come across on here. But
Okay.
I don't know. I guess for like when I think about, travel and having an experience, there are, I think, certain types of experiences that are out there that you could have that could scare you, that you may, you might be terrified. You might discover things about yourself that you didn't even know existed. And I just feel like for Anthony Bourdain, he's such a well-renowned person. He understands all these different cultures, but I also do think that he was deeply introspective. And I don't know. I guess I sometimes wonder, like, if there is a danger in the mind of somebody that maybe has, struggles with some kinds of demons to, quote unquote, dig too deep. I mean, do
Yeah.
you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like, you get
That
really
makes
in your
sense.
head on things, like you're searching really deep inside, and I don't know, can you dig too deep?
I understand where you're going with that. I don't know if I fully agree because
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know. Like
I'm not saying like I agree one way or another. I just think it's interesting to think about.
I don't. Yeah, I feel like being exposed to a new okay. Well, let's say let's make a hypothetical here, Jordan. Right?
Yeah.
Let's say you're thrown head into an alien race. Like you know absolutely nothing on a different planet. Like there's nothing remotely human about it. Do you think that's diving too deep?
No,
Do you think you could go insane if you do something like that?
I don't know. Maybe. And I think that's what I was also trying to get at too, is that in Apocalypse Now specifically, I mean, the character of Kurtz, Marlon Brando, is arguably insane. I mean, he experienced something, or he had PTSD from war,
Yeah,
or a combination of things, and lost his mind.
yeah,
I don't know. I find it really fascinating, people that get to a point like that. I don't think Anthony Bourdain did, but I think he had a fascination with people that explored their psyche like that. It's very interesting.
yeah. Anthony Bourdain is an interesting guy.
I
He
knew
lived
this
an
was going to be
interesting
an
life.
interesting episode, my friend.
This is an interesting episode, Jordan. I'm glad I gotta watch Apocalypse Now. Now you described it very
Yeah,
well, or you've made me think now. You've kind of caught me off guard here because now there's a lot of things going through my head and I don't know what to think of it.
I think you would like it. I mean,
I'm
knowing
no,
knowing
I'm gonna watch it now. So
yeah.
you've
Well,
convinced me.
I would happily do an episode on it. I mean, I think it's a great movie, for a lot of different reasons. It's not exactly one I would go back and rewatch a lot, but it sticks with you. So,
Okay. Well,
but
I love those kind of movies, so
so
I'm
let
to
me
watch it now.
let me mention this though, because this is a story I was actually going to read. I was going to read this off here because it made me think of Anthony Bourdain, and like his search for meaning and purpose, and maybe if he did dig too deep on something. I don't remember if they stated this in the documentary, but do you know the story of Icarus?
Yeah,
Don't fly too
yeah. You got
close to
the
the
don't
sun.
go fly too close to the sun. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I had to Google it a little bit, because I had heard the expression, but I kind of actually wanted to like read into like what the story actually meant.
Hmm.
And the story, just for those of you that don't know, it's a story based in Greek mythology, and it's talking about how Icarus, he's the son of a master craftsman named Daedalus. I might not be
Daedalus, yeah.
saying that right.
Hmm.
And that is the creator of the labyrinth. And Icarus and Daedalus, they attempt to escape the city called a crate, I think it is, by means of wings that Daedalus he constructed it from like a variety of different types of feathers and wax and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But anyways, Daedalus he warns Icarus first a complaint of complacency. I think if I'm complacency, I don't know if I'm saying that right, and then of hubris, and instructs him that if you fly neither too low or no too high, you'll be okay. But Icarus is like, well, like, I don't care what you're saying, and he ends up flying too close to the sun, causing his wings to melt, and therefore he tumbles out of the sky and drowns
Yeah,
in the ocean.
it's a
And
sad tale.
yeah, I mean, it's a sad tale. It's a cautionary tale, I suppose. There's a lot of different things you could take from that, but I don't know. I guess Anthony Bourdain's life, in a way, reminded me of that story a little bit, uh, because I feel like he was always in danger of that, just because he kind of lived out on the edge. I mean, some of the places he went to, I went to Libya once. He was there around like Benghazi and things like that. I mean, he would go to some pretty dicey places.
Yeah. So you
Um,
think hubris is that what you're saying? Is because I always thought Icarus
I
was based on hubris.
I'd have to double check it. I'll be honest.
Okay.
I'm not a Greek mythology expert, but I did
I mean, you could take
I did
it.
a little bit of homework.
You could take it a lot of different ways, but I've always seen Kid Icarus or like Icarus. He had too much hubris, too
Well,
confident in
now,
himself.
is that what that
And he
means?
flew too close.
Hubris is another word for competence, right? Like they're very full of themselves.
Arrogance.
Arrogance.
Like, yeah, I got this, figured it out, and then they fly too close to the sun. I think that's where the expression comes from. I think, right?
I think
I honestly
so.
could be
Well,
totally I could be totally wrong there. Who really
hey,
knows? But
surprised
that's an interesting take, though.
I'm surprised I sounded halfway decent talking about Icarus. So I was like, that sound right when I said it. Okay.
Daedalus, dude. Daedalus. He's
So
a cool guy.
so the last subject that I wanted to talk about in here, this is going to be the hardest one. We've been dancing around it, but I want to talk just strictly about suicide.
Okay.
Um,
This is a serious one. You should start.
yeah, I'll start. Well, first, it's again, I've said it multiple times in this. I don't think I need to reiterate again that it's tragic what happened with Bourdain and that he did it. Um, I think, in hindsight, looking back on it and the impact it had. I mean, I do feel like his suicide in particular, it had an impact. Uh, he had a pretty big following of people, and I mean, outside of just his celebrity and people being sad that he was gone, I think I saw that there was a lot of conversations that got started around, reignited about mental health issues and things like that. And I think those conversations are always going around, but when someone famous passes away from it, it tends to, put them back in the spotlight, kind of similar to when Robin
Yeah.
Williams ended up doing
I
it.
think I think especially the way Anthony Bourdain lived his life is what particularly brought it to the front, where it's like you could do all these crazy things, but that
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean anything sometimes.
Well, it, I think one of the very first things you think about when you're talking about suicide is, especially if you have the personal connection, is you always are wondering why. And it's the maddening question, because unless the person was kind enough, and maybe not kind enough is the right word, but they if they leave a note, they record a video, they just straight up tell you why. I have a feeling that doesn't happen all that often. So a lot of
Hmm.
people, family and friends, they're left wondering why somebody does it. Um, you know, to ask you, I mean, like, and again, if this gets too dark, like I said, I mean, I'm perfectly happy to, to not get super into it. I understand, because it's not something a lot of people are always comfortable about talking about. But
No, yeah, no worries.
um, I don't know. Do you ever wonder why people do it?
I've always thought that the biggest factor is being alone, I think. And that's not necessarily mean like, oh, they don't have a mother and father, or oh, they don't have any friends. That could just mean like they don't feel a connection with anyone else, or
Yeah.
they don't have that sort of like, I've always thought it's just the alone thing of like, if I am like completely alone in this world and no one else understands me and no one can like see what I'm seeing or think the way that I think, then that's what would put, I think, someone over the edge personally. Cause like I think I think most people understand that committing suicide like has so many impacts on especially the people that are closest to you and people that you form the closest connections with. And I
Hmm.
think that's a big thing that turns people off from suicide is understanding that like, well, wait, I have these people in my life that care for me and that want like what's best for me.
Right.
And I think not being able to see that, whether that be a fog, whether that not even be there in the first place, whatever it may
Yeah.
be, I think that is what at the end of the day causes someone to commit suicide is just that feeling of loneliness and that feeling of not having someone to go to time of like need.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily mean like I called someone and they didn't pick up. That could just more mean like I'm in this mental state and I feel completely alone in this mental state. And I feel like no one that I talk to is going to understand my mental state or is going to be able to help me with what's going on in my life. So then I'm just going to kill myself because what does it matter? I think that's what does it at the end of the day. I think
Hmm.
you could really see that in Anthony Bourdain too, of like there were people that were trying to reach out to him. There were people that were trying to help him, but I think you're just so bogged by whatever it may be that what really makes you want to do it at the end is that feeling of loneliness and that feeling of having no one to turn to.
Yeah. I
What's
mean,
your take, Jordan?
you can speculate a lot of different reasons for why. I mean, and I think, I mean, you said it earlier on in this, but the human mind is so complex, and there's still so much I think that we're learning about it, even still to this day. People develop differently. Their backgrounds are different. The age that you do it is going to be different as well. It all plays a factor. But I think loneliness, of course. Yeah, I mean, sure. If somebody's really lonely, they feel like they don't have someone to reach out to. I think that's a perfectly, I'm careful to say a valid reason, but a reason that I would understand if someone
Yeah.
if someone did it. Um, but I don't know. I think for myself, when I think about it, I think about it's hard to put in the words, honestly, because I wish I was more well versed in this subject for talking about it, just psychologically speaking.
Hmm.
um but no, I think when you had touched on talking about like the mental fog, or a weight on your mind, I think sometimes people do it because it's like an act of desperation. Like, because I've, like, myself, like, I have experienced depression, as I'm sure a lot of other people have. I've taken medication for it,
Hmm.
and I understand when you have like a powerful, heavy feeling that weighs so heavily on your mind that, like, even the notion of, it's not like you're afraid to talk about it, but it's like even the notion of really unpacking it seems like a daunting task. And like it's like it's almost it's the most exhausting for the person that has to do it, because it takes, I think, a lot of strength to really face those parts of yourself and really get it out of you, whether it's talking about it or journaling about it. Art, there's a lot of different ways I think that people can express it and get those demons out, so that it's not eating them and ultimately leading them to the act. But I
Hmm.
don't know, I see a lot of it as just desperation, that people are, they they're mentally rooted in a spot that they don't feel like they can talk about it. They don't have the strength to do it, the inner will.
Hmm.
um and of course, I mean, this isn't even like accounting for people that have heavy alcohol abuse or drugs or are addicts, because I mean, people do that just because they're zonked out, like they're
Oh
they're
yeah,
messed up out of their minds, so they don't even know like what's going on. That's a whole different subject. But
that's a whole different subject. Yeah.
yeah, I can the last thing I'll say about that is this is dark, but I mean, I don't always wonder sometimes because life is hard and the rates are pretty staggering when you look at suicide. I think when I was looking at it recently, I think it saw it's like still like the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. And I think I also saw that like like 130 people I think do it like every minute or something like that.
Mhm.
Like if you break
Yeah.
it down from like a numbers game, I don't know. I get a lot of thoughts too, man. Like I've had dark thoughts, and like I've joked about the subject of suicide before, and you know I say context is everything for stuff like this. I think I don't think it's like a subject like that's like off limits to like have a joke about. I think it's just all about the context and the meaning of it, and kind of what you're getting at. Um, anyways, my point with all that is that I guess I get it because I'd be lying if I said I never had like a dark messed up thought about doing stuff. Never
Yeah.
saying I've acted on it, but I get it. I mean,
Yeah. No,
it's really not shocking. I mean, I get why some people do it. I get it. Doesn't
I
mean I like
agree.
it. It's very sad. It's heartbreaking.
I personally, yeah, I fully understand because I feel like I've had similar things. Like, I can very much see where someone's coming from, where they want to suicide.
Yeah.
Like, I've had bad parts of my life, and there's been at those times like when there's no other options. It's like, well, that seems like a pretty good option. And some like once that's like an all right option, then it's like, oh my god, like I'm actually
Yeah.
thinking about this at this point, and like that's why for me I say the loneliness is such a big factor because like one of the biggest things preventing me from even like considering something like that is just
Yeah.
the people that I have in my life,
Right.
knowing that someone to turn to when something like that comes up and not having that like mental fog or that block to be like there are people in my life that love me and there's always someone that I can turn to if things are dark enough and there's always someone I can trust. Having that in my life is like if I didn't have that, like that would
Yeah.
suicide would definitely be a much bigger issue, I
Yeah.
think, in my life if I didn't have something like that. So that's why I say loneliness is I think such a big factor because
Yeah.
it's been such a helpful thing for me to have is just people in my life that I could talk to about my issues and people that I can like people that love me, you know. That's what's helped me get through it. But I completely understand where you're coming from too, where it's like I see what Anthony Bourdain has lived through, and I honestly like I'm still like sad at the fact that he committed
Yeah.
suicide, but you also kind of see a little bit like why it happened, like going through his life. It's like this
Yeah. I
man
mean
is like
the guy had demons. The
the
guy
guy
big demons. Yeah.
like the guy is incredibly depressing. He just like he had people to turn to, but he's just maybe it was just too far beyond that point where like he couldn't get
Yeah.
any help or there was no one that he could think of that would help him. So it's like
Well,
I kind of see where he's coming from. And it's like, committed suicide. Fuck, I don't want to that way. But
I do think that the very last thing I would say about Bourdain is that it's very tragic what happened, and I think if anything I probably became a bigger fan of him sadly in his passing than I did when he was alive. I mean, I learned more about him after he left than when he was living, which even I think about that and I'm like that's kind of messed up a little bit that it's like I'm now like listening and watching clips of somebody that's no longer with us and like I'm still entertained by it in a way but still fascinated and engaged. It's very strange. It's just very strange when like when you're watching that. But I guess when I think, ultimately about his life, I mean, I do think like how fortunate he was to have left behind a legacy like he did. I mean, I
mhm,
think he really impacted a lot of people's life just through his authenticity, through his work, through his travels. Like he shined a spotlight on a lot of different places, and he never came off as like being like a cookie cutter, like Food Network reality TV guy. Like he was pretty down and dirty, whether you liked him or not. And
mhm.
I don't know. I mean, it's awful what happened to him, but I hope he's at peace, wherever he's at. And I think it's just he and his family and friends, I think, should be so fortunate to have known that his legacy is mattered to so many people
It has. It's had
and
such
as
a
far
huge
reaching
impact.
as it is. Yeah. I mean, like that's I mean, I don't know. I mean, like if I were to die tomorrow, I don't think I'm having a documentary about me made. I'm
Probably
not.
not.
No, like I probably not. Like,
It'll have a big impact on my life, though, Jordan.
well, that's
So
nice.
if that makes you feel any better, it'll probably have a bigger impact than Anthony Bourdain would. Don't do that, Jordan. Stop it.
Hey.
I love man.
Positivity. I love you too, man.
Positivity.
That's
Yeah.
right. We
This is a
work
great
it out.
podcast, Jordan.
This is
This is a
good.
great podcast.
So I will start to wrap this up. There's one more thing I wanted to ask from you because I actually don't know how long we've been talking. This might be one of the longer episodes that I got. When someone does do it, and you don't have to go super in depth on this, but after somebody commits suicide and they're gone, I'm just curious. I mean, like, do you really think that there ultimately is a way to move forward? Or I mean, like, I think there's like or is there like forever damage done from the act and like it stays with you forever? It's like time doesn't heal all things.
I wouldn't say if something as serious as that goes on in your life, I wouldn't. Time heals all things is, I guess, the short answer to something that I would think. But like, really, it's so much more complicated than that. Because I do think if you have such a strong life event like something like that, like a very close friend of yours committing suicide, like that's something you will never forget for your entire life, and it's gonna hurt, and there's nothing that's gonna stop the hurting. But you kind of just I feel like you would just put it in the back of your mind as it gets like 10 years down the road, or you sort of start to
Right.
come to grips with what happened and you try to just move on from it and live your own life. But I don't think it necessarily heals. It just kind of becomes part of who you are, you know?
Yeah.
Like you kind of just suck it in. Like it's this hole in your life, or it's this twist in your brain or whatever it is, and it's never going to leave. Like you
Hmm.
can adapt your life and you can live your life
It
to
changes you.
not like think about it constantly and not act on that specific event constantly, but it changes who you are as a person, I think, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right. I actually promised I would end the episode actually with this, but on a perfectly serious note, as if we weren't already serious enough on this, if
Mhm.
anybody out there that is listening ever does actually have any bad thoughts or real issues with the subject of suicide or has ever considered it, I'm not treating this as a public service announcement, but you can contact the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. The number is 1-800 273-8255. Again, that's 1-800-273-8255. So definitely call that if you ever were so inclined to, or at the very least, just reach out to someone, even if it is not somebody that's a close friend, because believe me, people care. And most anybody, I don't even care if you're not a well-liked person, nobody that I can think of in their right mind would really wish that upon somebody's life to end that way. So
No.
sorry to end it like that. I kind of figured that this would happen with this episode and the content, but it's really just it's a serious subject. But I mean, at the same time, like, I kind of
It's an
go back
important thing
to,
to talk. It's an
well, it's an
important thing to
important thing
talk
to
about.
talk about, but also I want to make this clear too. It's like I think you can still crack a joke about it every once in a while, damn it. Because
I agree.
yeah, because like I mean, like that's the thing. Like you can get really serious and self-righteous on a subject like this, but it's like, you know what? I've laughed about it before, and sometimes laughter helps. Okay.
That's
Doesn't make me I don't think it makes me a bad person.
Yeah. If it helps, you can. Here's another humor point: is if you're feeling that way as well, you can find me on Facebook and send me a message, and I'll talk to you.
There you go. Adam will be your friend.
I'll be your friend, Adam Wall on Facebook. Find
You'll,
me,
you'll
add
actually have
me.
to you'll have to let me know if like after the fact, like be like, hey, ever since we put out that episode, I
It's
had
been
like
like
a bunch
20
of
people,
people.
dude.
Oh my
Dude,
gosh.
it could happen. Who knows?
Well, everybody, that's gonna wrap up the episode. So, Adam, I appreciate you being here. This was a longer conversation, but I really actually thoroughly enjoyed talking about this movie. Um, this documentary and just talking about something true that's, you know, entirely based in reality. I mean, it's just real life. It's I don't know, it's I think it makes for just compelling content. Anyways, I appreciate you coming along the ride with me.
It was a powerful movie. Thank you for having me, Jordan. This was a great conversation.